Hey, I'm Steve, founder of New Matter, and you're watching the Fargo 3D Printing Show.
Like New Matter said, you are watching the Fargo 3D Printing Show. Jake Clark and John Schneider here today. Second part of the CES coverage. We got a couple different things. We're going to talk about Nano Dimension, Markforged, Voxelate, Raise 3D, Old World Labs, MatterHackers, and AOI Robotics. So we're going to cover those today. So let's start out with Nano Dimension. So John, I think
I missed out on this one.
I think you missed out on this one.
Yep.
But so Nano Dimensions is a PCB 3D printer. They're out of Israel. Todd and Eric and I got to see this, and it was really, really cool. The machine looks beautiful, by the way. But he actually showed us a little PCB board, and PCBs technically are 3D printed anyway in mass manufacturing, as layer by layer by layer. But what this is capable of doing is kind of cutting out that middleman of the PCB manufacturer making boards for you. You can just do it on the fly with multiple layers and multiple circuits. So that's kind of the base information that we got from them. The machine roughly retails for about 50K, somewhere there. So very, very expensive machine. But it's kind of interesting, just this type of technology. And it wasn't even in the 3D printing realm, or in the 3D printing section, which was odd to me. It was downstairs in kind of the startup-y community thing. And they're kind of off back in a corner. So it was kind of weird to not see them upstairs where they probably should have been, in my opinion, because it was a beautiful machine, very beautiful machine. But yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of technology, because I don't know if there's anybody else out there besides really Voxelate, but that's a different style.
Yeah, it's a different style of electronics 3D printing. So
it's going to be interesting to see how this type of 3D printer kind of evolves over the next coming years. So I don't know if we got any footage as far as it running, but a little bit. So we'll show that. But other than that, we didn't have a whole lot of information on this machine besides that.
So I guess along the lines of electronics printers, so the Voxelate is another one that you mentioned. So we're going a little out of order here.
It's okay.
So Voxelate doesn't 3D print PCBs. What it does is it has a dual extrusion system where the one material can be, I think, ABS or PLA. I think they're working with some nylons right now. And then the second material is a liquid silver ink. So that's what the conductive parts of the print are made out of. So it's able to do both materials at the same time. But the really interesting thing with the Voxelate is the software. So they've partnered up with Autodesk. I think this is part of their Autodesk with the Spark Fund.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the Autodesk.
Sorry, they also had a booth with SolidWorks, so that's why. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no worries. But they've done a lot of stuff on the software side of things where you can. Your design, you can say, okay, this is where all these different electronic components are going to be, and then as it's printing, it can either automatically figure out where those traces should be within the print, or you can manually say where you want the traces to be, and then as it's printing, when it comes time to drop in one of the electronic components, then it'll pause the print, send out a notification, or just saying, hey, okay, you can drop this in now, and then it'll continue 3D printing over the top of it. So you have embedded electronic components inside of the print. So one of the things they were showing off at the show was a 3D printed watch. So not your typical watch with the moving hands and that sort of thing. It was more of like I think it was like a binary style watch where it used LED lights to indicate what the time was. It was something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what it looks like. I think Eric has probably pulled up some pictures and is showing what it looks like. One of the other things they've done is a 3D printed quadcopter. So the electronic components in there, of course, the motors, the circuit board, that all gets dropped in, but then the traces that connect the motors to the power source and a few other things, those are all embedded inside of the 3D print.
Yeah, and the printer is actually available for pre-order. It's not cheap.
And it's not so much it's not pre-order or like
pre-order
mass
the
production.
developer's kit.
Yeah, so the developer's kit. So kind of like the Oculus Rift. This isn't intended for it's not intended for mainstream consumption. It's intended for people that are fine with experimenting with how the printer works and spending the time to make it work.
So it's about $9,000.
Yeah, so it's not a cheap printer,
No.
but what it does, it seems to do pretty well.
It's highly capable. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this sort of technology kind of comes out here in the next couple of years, and see how we can start working with electronics and some of these 3D printed prosthetics would be awesome for this.
Yeah, so okay, that's Voxelate. Then going back, so another type of a more advanced FDM style 3D printer is the Markforged. So Markforged is the name of the company, and then the Mark I is the name of the 3D printer. So this is the 3D printer that can print with continuous strand carbon fiber, Kevlar, and fiberglass, I think is the other material. So it uses nylon as its primary material. So a nylon part is already going to be pretty strong, pretty tough, very resistant to strain and stress. But with this continuous strand printing that you can do with it, so it's carbon fiber, fiberglass, and Kevlar. Okay, so it has that second extruder that is, we have an interview where the founder of Markforged explains exactly how this works. But basically you have a thread that gets laid in continuous loops throughout the print, and then there's a knife or a blade that actually cuts that. So it's not like carbon fiber filament where you have hundreds of thousands of tiny little carbon nanotubes that are mixed in within the filament. This is just a continuous strand, and that adds a lot of strength. They had a part there that was printed with just the nylon, and then one that was carbon fiber reinforced, and the difference was astounding.
Yeah, we actually saw the first one we saw in action. I think was down in Minneapolis at a medical devices show, and it was interesting because we had never really seen it in action. We also saw it down
videos of it, of course.
Yeah,
but it's
we never saw it in person.
Run. Yeah.
And that's what we noticed, that it would cut the strand and then fill out the rest of, push out that strand and then move on. So it was interesting to see that idea and process with it.
And one of the things with the slicer for the Markforged, for the Mark I, it's not a desktop-based slicer. All of the slicing happens in the cloud. So you set up how you want your file laid out, and then it sends that information up to their servers. It processes all of it, because that's where it determines where to put the continuous strand fiber in. And you can have it in different densities. You can control exactly where you want the fiber if you want. You can control exactly how much fiber you want to use, but the fiber is not cheap. I don't remember what the exact cost was, but to get a stronger part, you pay for it. I think it's still going to cost less than 3D printing something on like a Stratasys machine, because their filament isn't, the nylon filament isn't too expensive, but the continuous strand stuff gets a little wonky.
Because their machines are 8,800 and 5,600, I think.
Yeah, so also not an inexpensive machine, but it's a very well built machine. It's very robust, and the parts that they're making, these aren't just little one-off prototypes. These are truly functional prototypes. So if you're doing jig and fixtures, it'd be perfect for that, because now you don't need to worry so much about the ABS cracking or flexing too much. But I don't know. That's about all I have on the Markforged. So I know I think they talked about material prices in the interview that we did with them a little bit. I know they have the two different versions of the Markforged. One of them is at $5,500 price point, and then the other one is $8,800. The more expensive one is the only one that can work with Kevlar. The Kevlar material is extremely, extremely abrasive as it's being fed through the printer. So they needed to have some pretty significant hardware upgrades to enable printing with Kevlar, but it creates incredibly strong, incredibly durable parts.
Yeah.
So that's what I got on the Markforged. Jake, then I think you were going to do...
I think we're going to talk about Raise 3D, because I know you interviewed them. We've seen them at a lot of different places, and this is one we're excited for. Yeah. Because the printer, this is a Kickstarter, but before the Kickstarter, they actually had produced a printer as well. I don't remember what it was. Was it the Idea Maker? Let's see. I think it might have been... Yeah,
the Idea Maker is their slicer. I forget what their other printer was called. It was a blue printer. It was distributed through, I know, Toy Builder Labs, I think was the U.S. distributor for them. And they're going to be the main U.S. distributor for Raise 3D. They have a pretty good working relationship.
So it was really interesting. We've been talking about this, and it's just a really, really cool machine. I know that during the interview they actually unplugged it, and then and it kept going, or it paused. It paused.
So what it does, there's a backup power supply inside the printer, and then when the power is cut to the printer, then it basically looks at what line of G code it was on, and then it saves that to some sort of long-term memory, and then it basically shuts everything down. So that way it's not powering the extruder to be on and heat it up. It's not powering the heated bed, and then when power is put back to the printer, so once you plug the printer back in, then it's able to, it starts preheating back to where it was, and it looks at where it was when the power was cut. So it keeps the power going internally long enough so it can save where it's at, and then, so then when it gets powered back on, then it can resume. So, I mean, we haven't really ran into too many issues with power cutting out being a problem with 3D printing.
I used to where I used to work, we used to have the power cut like every, it would surge about maybe once every 2 weeks maybe.
Yeah. So I mean, this is going to be nice, and the build volume of these printers is pretty incredible. When you look at the build volume that you get for the price, I think
retail is $3,300. Pre-order price is $2,640.
And that's on the N2 Plus, and that one's 12 by 12 by 18 inches. Or oh no,
24.
24
by 24. It's just for the price point and the size and the prints that we saw, it was incredible.
And it seems to have a really simple extrusion system too. It's I like it because it actually has a window on the side of the extruder, so you can see the filament path all the way from the top of the extruder down to where the nozzle is. So you can't see the cutout where the thermal barrier tube is. You can see where it's at. You don't see the filament as it's inside there, but it's able to, it helps, so in case there ever is a jam, you can quickly diagnose it without having to take everything apart. You can see if it's just at the drive wheel that, that something's jammed up, or if it is something further down and you'll need to take it apart.
One thing I'm still not sure, but they don't have a guide tube. The film is just kind of hanging there. I don't know why they don't have a guide tube yet. That'd be the one thing that would kind of be the. It's not really a necessity because it prints really well without one. It's just more of.
It prints well with standard PLA, ABS. If you start printing with anything more brittle, like if you work with like a carbon fiber
or a
film,
stainless.
Yeah, or stainless. Any of like the color fab stuff where they have the metal filled materials, and even even like our glass filled PLA, it would probably struggle with, just because that bend radius,
it's direct.
It's uncontrolled. So it goes. So here's the hole where the filament comes in. Here's the extruder here, and then there's just a loop with nothing.
And sometimes it goes like a loop, and sometimes it just kind of cuts over, as it depends on how the head's moving.
Yep. And how freely the spool can turn too.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that they don't have a guide tube. It'd be nice if they had a guide tube.
It seems like it'd be like a 15-cent upgrade on their end.
But it's also in a weird spot too, because if you look at like a DaVinci Junior or something, how they bring their guide tube in is it's a little hose press nut, not press nut, but it's a little hose press thing.
Yeah, it's a press fit coupler.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And that's threaded in there. And how their head is assembled though is it's a piece in acrylic and then a plastic part on the back that's bolted together. So you couldn't thread that until a secondary process. So I mean that's one thing. The other thing how you can solve it is how MakerBot did in their Rep 2.
Right, and that's
with a friction.
Yeah.
So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah,
that's one upgrade that I see that you guys can do.
I think there's going to be a lot of orders to McMaster Car just for a PTFE tube for that. Because again, it's if you do it aftermarket like that, it's probably going to be $10. Yeah, so it's not the end of the world when you look at the price of the printer.
For what you're getting and how well it's built, I'd be excited to actually get one of these in and test it and trial it and see how it performs.
Yeah.
In the real world. So if any of you have it, because I know I don't remember when their Kickstarters were going to start shipping. I thought it was the end of January.
I think they were starting to ship already. They did their first run.
So if any of you have tried it, let us know. Send us a comment down below and send us a link to a review that you've done, and we'd be interested to see what your guys' take is on the machine if you actually have one. So anything else with Race 3D? I know we did an interview with them, so that'll be up shortly as well. The next one we're gonna go to is Old World Labs. Oh, Old World Labs. This one's fun. So earlier we talked about before CES that we went there, and all they had was their machines that looked like an F-16 fighter cockpit.
Yeah, I mean, it looks very futuristic. I'll give them that.
But there was ropes, and nobody really gave us any information. Same thing this year.
Yeah, it wasn't for lack of trying either. You know, on our end of trying to get information, they just wouldn't say anything.
Yeah, I walked up, I said, so what do you guys do? We 3D print. Okay, what do you guys 3D print? Stuff. Okay, a little bit more information, and then, you know, evidently this is what I got from him, was that they are in the market of custom building their SLA DLP machines for very niche markets. They're very high priced,
I guess.
200,000 plus price point. But like they didn't have, they didn't have any samples unless you talk to the guy, which pretty much you wouldn't want to talk to the guy after the intro conversation.
I mean, this wasn't a small booth. It's a 400 square foot booth. It's 20 feet by 20 feet.
And it's at least 20 grand just for that. Somewhere around,
yeah, probably right around that. So for them to be there, either they needed to spend some money before the end of their fiscal year, or they have some requirement that they just need to be at the show, because I can't imagine they pick up a lot of customers there, unless the customers they pick up are worth so much money that they only need to pick one up at CES, and
their website doesn't really. So I mean, they have consultation and custom applications. So I mean, that's, I guess, one area where they customer requirements, they say testing, data migration, performance, custom application. So
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's one of those things that if you have to ask, you can't afford it.
Maybe. Well, I guess, okay, so their specs are, resolution is 1 micron, precision is 100 nanometers. He did say that it was on the nano side that their market is. So I'll give them that, is that they did mention that. But other than that, you should have a little bit more presentation with it instead of a roped off area. You should have at least a couple prints in a glass case in the corner, so that people can come by and actually see. And then, because you never know who's going to be in the market for something like this. If they have to go and dig, they're probably not going to dig that deep.
Right.
Just my opinion.
Yeah. And they also had a guy just sleeping on the couch in their booth at one point. So there's that.
Yeah. So
all right, Old World Labs.
Well, we'll see next year. Maybe they changed.
Moving on to MatterHackers.
Yeah, you talked to them about their Matter Control.
Yeah, so we had a customer that purchased a Matter Control Touch probably a year and a half ago. They worked with it a little bit, but this customer wasn't. I don't know. It was taking longer for them to set it up and configure it than they anticipated. So they handed it off to us, and we've been working with it a little bit. So MatterHackers at the show is unveiling a new version of Matter Control Touch. So the original one is a 7-inch tablet. The new one is a 10-inch tablet, which in my opinion is a big step. I mean, it doesn't sound like a big difference, but some of the controls on the touch screen, when it's only 7 inches, it gets pretty difficult to select if you have fat fingers. I mean. Because some of it, it's not very tall. It's maybe an eighth of an inch. The line of text is maybe an eighth of an inch to a quarter inch tall. And I mean, you could touch it and select it, but it'd be difficult it'd be difficult to do it.
Just wasn't expecting you to say it like that.
Well, no, I mean, and there were some other things too that I had some complaints about how they handled their. How they handle syncing files from the desktop to the Matter Control Touch. For example, it times out after a certain amount of time. So if you're slicing a large file, let's say it's the G-code file ends up being 5 megabytes, it will time out before it gets uploaded to their server, so you can't ever get it sent to the Matter Control Touch. So it would work fine for small prints. And I found out the reason for that is because it all goes to their server, and then it syncs from their server to the Matter Control Touch. It's not like having an Octoprint where you're sending it across your local network to the Raspberry Pi in the instance of Octoprint. So they said they're working on a version of it so that you can network with it locally, and then that will improve the camera refresh rate too. So the Matter Control Touch has a camera built into it, so you can actually view how your print is doing. The downside is it only seems to take an image every 30 seconds or 45 seconds. I haven't timed it exactly, but it doesn't allow you to see the print really going in real time. There's always that 30 to 60 second delay. So I mean, it looks like they're stepping their stuff up. they're continuing to develop it. They're continuing to improve it. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, I'm just glad to see that it wasn't just kind of a one and done type of product for them, where they put it out there and then didn't support it. So the support seems to be continuing.
Yeah, because they do a couple different things. I think they started out as a
like filament.
Well, filament and printers. I know they had. I wonder if they still have. Yeah, they have a bunch of different things that they sell. Literally a lot of different printers. But so I mean that's kind of where they started, was with the printer sales and the filament sales, and now they've kind of done this as kind of an offshoot. So it'll be interesting to see how that progresses.
Yeah, so that's all I've got on MatterHackers though. So Jake, and then the next one and the last one for today is AIO Robotics.
Yeah, so I didn't get to talk to them too much. I think maybe Eric did a little bit more than I did.
I just looked at it.
So they were next to us in Santa Clara, and they have a couple different things. So it's a 3D printer and I think a 3D scanner as well.
Yeah, the all in one basically. So
So it'll be interesting to see. Again, I didn't dig into any of this. It was kind of in passing that we saw this. But it'll be interesting, this kind of, not brand of printer, but style of printer where you have that all in one. I think DaVinci was going to try and do something like that. There's another one, Zmorph is trying to do that with a bunch of different tools. It'll be interesting to see how well they can perform each individual task.
Because what we've seen in the past is if you try and do everything in one machine, you don't do anything in the machine particularly well. You're able to kind of do everything. And I mean, I think the prints we've seen come off of this are good.
Yeah.
But the scanning side of things, I mean, it's so difficult to do 3D scanning at that price point, period. Even if that was the price point, $3,000 or $2,500 or whatever the price on the, $2,500 for the printer. If it was just a 3D scanner at that price point, it still wouldn't perform as well as a lot of general consumers think a 3D scanner should perform.
Yeah, expectations are a little bit higher. They expect it to be dimensionally accurate and editable, where that's not always the case with some of these scanners, is where you have to pull it into something like a Geomagic software where you can actually change it from an STL into a solid, and that's a very expensive product. So, I mean, that's kind of a wrap-up of CES Part 2. I think we'll have more interviews coming out. We got the couple 3D Systems interviews out, the MakerBot interview out. I think those were the 4 that we got out. 3? I'm being told 3 as of now.
And by the time this is released, there's probably going to be another 1 or 2.
Yeah.
So we know that there's a lot of questions that you've asked in the comments of past videos. We haven't been ignoring them. We are going to get to them. We just wanted to make sure we got through all of the CES information first. So next week's podcast is going to be a focus on answering those questions. So I know there's a few of them that are similar. A lot of you have asked about the same 3D printer. So we're going to do our best to dive into that and answer those questions as best we can. But I think.
And if you have any additional ones, if you have any additional questions, put those in the comments below so we can answer those. Any specifics on this podcast as well. Also, we got our t-shirts up. Finally.
Yes.
So those are available for purchase.
Yep.
So if you want to get some swag, we'll put the link in there as well for you to go get some of that.
Yeah. But I think that's it. So on behalf of myself, John Schneider, Jake Clark, we want to thank you for watching the Fargo 3D Printing Show. If you haven't already, subscribe to us. It's awesome. I mean, because we keep having more stuff coming out. The videos aren't going to be slowing down. I think, well, a little bit after CES. But if you want to know about,
I'm going to be traveling a lot.
But if you want to know about the stuff as it's happening, following us on social media is going to be the best way to do it. So Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, pretty much any of those channels we update regularly. So anything else, Jake?
No.
All right. Well, thanks again.
Thanks.
I got called a bag of the other day. It's like, what does that even mean? Like,
do they mean like they're in there like French bread, all like stacked neatly, or are they just all like thrown in there like oranges? And...
No. A bag of, not a baguette of.
okay, I'm recording.